The crimson sky above New Geneva burned with the fire of dying ships. Admiral Sarah Chen pressed her palm against the cold metal of the command center's window, watching humanity's final fleet crumble before the unstoppable Vorth Armada. The alien vessels moved like predators through space, their dark hulls absorbing light itself, making them appear as tears in reality. "Admiral, we've lost the Beijing and the Normandy," Commander Torres reported, his voice barely steady. "The entire Third Fleet is gone. We're down to 12 ships." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. 12 ships. From the thousands that had defended Earth just 6 months ago, only 12 remained. The Vorth had swept through human space like a plague, their technology so advanced that humanity's weapons barely scratched their shields. Every battle had been a massacre disguised as a military engagement. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Vorth flagship," the communications officer announced. "Put it through." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the nightmarish form of Overlord Kethvar. The Vorth leader's 4 eyes gleamed with malicious intelligence, while his mandibles clicked in what Sarah had learned was their equivalent of laughter. His gray chitinous skin reflected the bridge lights, making him appear even more alien and terrifying. "Admiral Chen," Kethvar's voice was like grinding metal, translated through their universal communication devices. "Your species has fought admirably for insects. But this ends now. Surrender your remaining vessels and I will grant your people a swift extinction, rather than the centuries of slavery I had planned." Sarah straightened her uniform and met the alien's gaze. "You want these ships? Come and take them." Kethvar's mandibles clicked faster. "So be it. You will watch your homeworld burn before you die." The transmission ended and Sarah turned to her crew. These men and women had followed her through hell itself, watching friends and family die as world after world fell to the Vorth invasion. Earth's colonies were ash. Mars was a graveyard. Only Earth itself remained, and barely. "All ships, this is Admiral Chen," she broadcast to the remnants of humanity's navy. "Today we make our last stand. Not for victory, because we all know that's impossible. We fight so that when the universe forgets our names, it will remember that humans died on their feet, not on their knees." The Vorth fleet began its final approach. 300 ships against 12. Sarah had seen the tactical projections. They had perhaps 10 minutes before complete annihilation, but those would be 10 minutes of pure human defiance. "Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Defense Command," Torres said, confusion evident in his voice. "It's on the old emergency frequency, the one that's been silent for 30 years, Sarah finished. The frequency used by the Deep Space Exploration Initiative, the program that had sent humanity's best and brightest into the void beyond known space, searching for new worlds and new hope. They had vanished without a trace 3 decades ago, presumed lost to the dangers of deep space exploration. Put it through." The voice that emerged from the speakers was older, weathered, but unmistakably human. "This is Admiral Marcus Kane of the Deep Space Fleet to any human forces in the Sol system. We are en route to your position. Hold the line." Sarah's blood ran cold. Marcus Kane had been her mentor, the greatest military mind humanity had ever produced. He had led the Deep Space Initiative when she was just a lieutenant. But that was impossible. He would be in his 80s now, and besides, the Deep Space Fleet had been lost decades ago. "Unknown vessel. Identify yourself properly." "Admiral Kane has been missing for 30 years, Sarah replied. "I know how long we've been gone, Admiral Chen. We've been fighting our own war out there, and we've learned a few things about how to kill aliens." On the tactical display, new contacts began appearing at the edge of the solar system. 1 ship at first, then 10, then hundreds. But these weren't the outdated vessels that had left Earth 30 years ago. These ships were different, larger, and they moved with a purpose that spoke of hard-won experience. The lead vessel was massive, easily dwarfing Earth's largest battleships. Its hull was scarred by countless battles, marked with symbols and decorations that spoke of victories and distant stars. As it approached, Sarah could make out its name painted in bold letters along the hull. Indomitable. "Admiral Kane, what happened to you out there?" "Where have you been?" Sarah asked, hope beginning to bloom in her chest for the first time in months. "We found them first, Sarah. The Vorth. We've been fighting them for 30 years in the dark between stars, and we've learned their weaknesses." The Vorth fleet had noticed the new arrivals and was beginning to turn, confused by the appearance of unknown human vessels. Overlord Kethvar's face reappeared on the communication screen, his four eyes wide with what might have been concern. "This changes nothing," the Vorth leader snarled. "More insects to crush. Your reinforcements will only delay the inevitable." But Sarah noticed something in the alien's voice, a tremor that hadn't been there before. Fear. The Deep Space Fleet took up formation, and Sarah could see they moved with the precision of veterans. These weren't the explorers who had left Earth decades ago. These were warriors, forged in the fires of a secret war humanity had never known was being fought. Admiral Marcus Kane stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, his weathered hands gripping the command rail as he watched the Vorth fleet through the main display. 30 years of war had carved deep lines into his face, and his once dark hair was now silver, but his eyes burned with the fire of a man who had seen hell and walked back out. "Sir, the Vorth are repositioning," reported Captain Elena Vasquez, his tactical officer. Like everyone on the Deep Space Fleet, she bore the scars of countless battles. Her left arm was cybernetic, a reminder of the Battle of Kepler 442b, where they had first learned that the Vorth could be hurt. "Let them move," Kane replied calmly. "They're confused. They've never faced humans who knew their tactics." The truth was more complex than Kane could explain in the middle of a battle. 30 years ago, the Deep Space Initiative had indeed been a peaceful exploration mission. They had discovered worlds beyond imagination, met alien species that had become allies, and pushed the boundaries of human knowledge further than ever before. Then they had encountered the Vorth Empire. The first meeting had been a massacre. The Vorth had destroyed 2 exploration ships without warning, treating them as they would any lesser species. But a few humans had survived, and they had learned. The Deep Space Fleet had been forced to evolve from explorers into something darker and more necessary. Humanity's secret guardians. "Admiral Chen, this is Kane," he broadcast to the remnants of Earth's fleet. "I need you to trust me completely. When I give the signal, I want your ships to fall back to Earth's atmosphere. Make it look like you're retreating in panic. Admiral Kane, with respect, we have 12 ships against 300. If we run now, you're not running. You're setting a trap. These Vorth think they know humans because they've been slaughtering civilians and unprepared military forces. They've never fought humans who have been hunting them for 3 decades. Kane turned to his communication officer, a young man named David Park, who had been born on a colony ship during their long campaign. David had never seen Earth, but he fought for it with the fury of someone defending home. "David, send the activation codes to the Sleeper Fleet." "Yes, sir. Broadcasting now." Throughout the outer solar system, automated systems that had been dormant for decades suddenly came online. Hidden bases on asteroids, concealed weapon platforms, and camouflaged hunter-killer drones all activated simultaneously. The Deep Space Fleet hadn't just been fighting the Vorth. They had been preparing Earth's defenses for the day the enemy would inevitably arrive. Overlord Kethvar's flagship suddenly shuddered, as invisible weapons struck its shields from multiple directions. The Vorth commander's 4 eyes darted frantically across his displays, as his sensors tried to track attackers that seemed to materialize from empty space. "What is this trickery?" Kethvar demanded, his mandibles clicking in agitation. Kane smiled grimly. "Cloaking technology, courtesy of our friends the Zephyrians. Amazing what you can learn when you're not trying to conquer everyone you meet." The Vorth fleet began taking fire from all directions. The hidden platforms used weapons that the Vorth had never encountered. Plasma cannons that could punch through their shields, quantum torpedoes that ignored their defensive systems, and something Kane's people called void mines that created small black holes to tear apart enemy ships. But the real surprise came when the Deep Space Fleet itself opened fire. The weapons that erupted from Kane's ships were unlike anything in Earth's arsenal. Beams of pure energy that seemed to bend space itself. Missiles that phased in and out of reality, and defensive systems that turned the Vorth's own weapons against them. Each ship in the Deep Space Fleet was a fusion of human engineering and alien technology, refined through 30 years of constant warfare. "How?" Kethvar's voice cracked across the communication channel. "How do you possess such technology?" "Because unlike you, we made friends instead of enemies," Kane replied. "The Zephyrians gave us cloaking tech when you tried to enslave them. The Crystalline Confederation shared their energy weapons after you attempted genocide on their homeworld. The machine collectives offered their defensive systems when you declared war on all artificial life. The Vorth fleet was in chaos. Ships that had seemed invincible just minutes before were exploding under the coordinated assault. But Kane knew this was just the beginning. The Vorth Empire was vast, and this fleet was merely the tip of the spear. "Admiral Chen, begin your retreat now," Kane ordered. "Make it convincing." Earth's remaining ships turned and fled toward their homeworld, engines blazing at maximum power. The Vorth, despite their losses, pursued. They had come too far to be denied their prize now. As the enemy fleet chased Earth's defenders deeper into the solar system, they flew directly into Kane's real trap. The Deep Space Fleet had spent years seeding the space around Earth with weapons that even the Vorth couldn't detect. Hidden in the asteroid belt, disguised as space debris, camouflaged against the planets themselves, 1,000 death traps waited. Captain Vasquez watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction as the first wave of Vorth ships entered the kill zone. "Gravity mines are armed and ready, sir. Fire everything." Space itself seemed to convulse as hidden weapons activated throughout the solar system. Gravity mines created localized distortions that crushed enemy ships like tin cans. Fusion charges detonated in carefully calculated sequences, creating destructive interference patterns that tore holes in reality. Quantum disruptors reached across space to simply delete sections of Vorth vessels from existence. In less than 10 minutes, the mighty Vorth armada had been reduced from 300 ships to fewer than 50. The survivors huddled around Kethvar's flagship, their formation broken and their confidence shattered. "This is impossible," the Vorth overlord whispered, his arrogance finally cracking. "You are an inferior species. We have conquered 1,000 worlds. We have crushed civilizations that span entire star systems." Kane's face appeared on Kethvar's screen, and for the first time in 30 years, the human admiral smiled. "That was your first mistake. You see, we humans have a saying. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You've been killing entire species before they could learn to fight back. But we survived, and we learned." Captain Elena Vasquez walked through the corridors of the Indomitable, her cybernetic arm whirring softly as she reviewed battle reports on her tablet. The ship's interior bore no resemblance to the clean, sterile vessels that had left Earth 3 decades ago. These walls were covered in alien writing, trophies from defeated enemies, and memorial plaques for the thousands who had died in humanity's secret war. She paused at one particular memorial wall, running her fingers over the names etched in metal. These were the crew of the exploration ship Horizon, the first human vessel to encounter the Vorth. Elena had been just a young lieutenant then, fresh out of the academy and excited about exploring the galaxy. The naive girl who had dreamed of making first contact with friendly aliens had died along with most of her shipmates in the Vorth ambush. "Still visiting the wall, Elena?" Admiral Kane's voice came from behind her. She turned to face her commanding officer, the man who had saved her life and forged her into the weapon she had become. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we had never left Earth, sir. If we had stayed home, maybe the Vorth would never have found us." Kane joined her at the memorial wall, his eyes scanning the hundreds of names. "The Vorth have been expanding for 10,000 years. They would have reached Earth eventually. At least this way, we were ready." The Deep Space Fleet's 30-year campaign had been brutal beyond imagination. What had started as a peaceful exploration mission had transformed into a desperate guerrilla war across half the galaxy. They had learned to strike from the shadows, hit Vorth supply lines, and rescue the survivors of conquered worlds. "Admiral, incoming priority transmission from the Zephyrian Council," came the announcement over the ship's communication system. Kane and Elena made their way to the bridge, where the main display showed the ethereal form of Council Speaker Erthus. The Zephyrians were beings of pure energy, creatures that existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions humans couldn't perceive. Their first encounter with the Vorth had nearly resulted in their extinction, until the humans had arrived to help. "Admiral Kane," Erthus spoke in harmonious tones that somehow conveyed meaning directly to the human mind. "We have monitored your engagement with the Vorth fleet at Earth. The Council is impressed by your victory." "Thank you, Speaker. But this is just the beginning. Kethvar will call for reinforcements. The main Vorth fleet will arrive within days. Yes, we are aware. The Crystalline Confederation has agreed to provide additional support. Their geometrical ships are already en route to your position. The machine collectives have also committed their battle networks to your cause." Elena smiled grimly. The alliance Kane had forged over 30 years was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Species that had been bitter enemies for millennia had united under human leadership against the Vorth threat. It hadn't been easy. Humans had died by the thousands playing mediator between races that communicated through combat, or species that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Earth Defense Command," reported David Park from his communication station. Admiral Chen's face appeared on a secondary screen, her expression a mixture of awe and confusion. "Admiral Kane, I need answers. How did you build all of this? The weapons, the allies, the hidden defenses? Earth's government has no record of any of this." Kane exchanged glances with Elena before responding. "Sarah, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound impossible. 30 years ago, we left Earth as explorers. We discovered that the galaxy is full of life, but most of it lives in fear of the Vorth Empire. When we first encountered them, they destroyed most of our fleet and took prisoners. The memories were painful even after all these years." Kane could still see the faces of the captured crew members as Vorth interrogators extracted every detail about Earth's location and defenses. That was when they had realized that Earth's destruction was inevitable, unless someone stopped the Vorth advance. "We spent the next 3 decades building a coalition," Kane continued. "The Vorth had made enemies of every advanced species in the galaxy. We simply gave those enemies hope and a way to fight back. But the technology, these weapons are centuries ahead of anything we have on Earth." Captain Vasquez leaned forward. "Admiral Chen, what do you get when you combine human adaptability with Zephyrian energy manipulation, crystalline geometric mathematics, and machine collective processing power? You get weapons that can hurt the Vorth." The truth was even more complex. Humans had proven uniquely capable of understanding and integrating alien technologies. While other species had rigid thinking patterns that made adaptation difficult, humans could look at a problem from dozens of different angles. They had become the galaxy's translators, taking technology from one species and making it compatible with another. "We've been preparing for this day for 30 years, Kane said. "Every battle we fought, every world we saved, every alliance we forged, it was all leading to this moment. The defense of Earth." On the tactical display, new contacts were appearing at the edge of the solar system, but these weren't Vorth ships. The geometric crystal vessels of the Confederation moved like living mathematics through space. The spherical ships of the machine collectives appeared to be made of pure metal that flowed like liquid. Energy beings rode in vessels that seemed to be constructed from solidified light itself. "Admiral," Elena reported, "we're receiving friendship signals from 47 different species. The galaxy has answered our call." Kane felt a surge of pride. This was what they had fought for, what they had died for. Not just Earth's survival, but the chance to show the galaxy that the Vorth could be beaten. "Sir, long-range sensors are detecting massive hyperspace disturbances," David announced, his voice tense. "Something big is coming." The main display shifted to show the outer edge of the solar system, where space itself was beginning to ripple and tear. The disturbances were unlike anything in human records, far larger than even the Vorth invasion fleet. "That's the Vorth main battle fleet," Kane said quietly. 5,000 ships, including their planet-killer dreadnoughts. Kethvar just called in everything. Elena felt her cybernetic arm twitch involuntarily. She had seen what Vorth planet killers could do. Entire worlds reduced to molten slag in minutes. Stars snuffed out like candles. It was the kind of firepower that civilizations used when they wanted to make examples that would terrorize the galaxy for generations. "Admiral Chen, I need you to evacuate Earth's civilian population to the underground shelters immediately," Kane ordered. "This is going to be unlike anything the galaxy has ever seen." "Admiral Kane," Erthus interjected, "the Council has made a decision. We are prepared to reveal the existence of the Sanctuary." Kane's eyes widened. The Sanctuary was legend even among the allied species, a hidden realm where the galaxy's greatest secrets were kept, protected by technology so advanced that even the Vorth had never found it. "Speaker, are you certain? Once we open that door, there's no going back." "The time for secrets has passed, Admiral. If the Vorth deploy their full strength against Earth, conventional weapons will not be sufficient. The galaxy's survival depends on weapons that should never be used." Elena looked at Kane, seeing the weight of impossible decisions in his eyes. The weapons hidden in the Sanctuary could destroy the Vorth Empire completely, but they could also destroy everything else in the galaxy if used incorrectly. "Do it," Kane decided. "Signal the Sanctuary. Tell them humanity calls in the ancient debt." The space around Earth had become a gathering point for the most diverse fleet in galactic history. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of her flagship, watching through reinforced transparasteel as alien vessels of impossible design took up defensive positions throughout the solar system. The crystalline Confederation ships moved like living geometry, their faceted hulls refracting sunlight into rainbow patterns that hurt human eyes to look at directly. Each vessel was a perfect mathematical construct, grown rather than built from crystal matrices that could reshape themselves based on tactical requirements. Chen watched in fascination as one ship transformed from a sleek fighter configuration into a massive cannon platform. In seconds, Admiral Chen came the voice of Admiral Kane through the communication system. "I'd like you to meet our allies properly. This is your first time seeing them in person." A new display activated, showing a three-way conference between Chen, Kane, and a being that defied human understanding. Crystalline entities didn't have bodies in any sense humans could comprehend. Instead, Prime Geometric Axiom 7 appeared as a constantly shifting pattern of light and mathematics, equations that wrote and rewrote themselves in the air. Human Admiral Chen, the entity spoke in concepts rather than words, its meaning transmitted directly into her mind. This one expresses geometric appreciation for human tactical adaptability. Your species demonstrates mathematical creativity that exceeds Vorth predictive algorithms. Chen blinked, trying to process communication that bypassed language entirely. "Thank you, Prime Axiom 7. I'm honored to fight alongside the Confederation." "Sir," interrupted Commander Torres from the tactical station, "we're receiving communication requests from multiple alien species. They all want to coordinate with Earth Defense Command." Chen turned to Kane's image on the screen. "Admiral, how exactly do we coordinate with beings that don't think like humans?" Kane smiled grimly. 30 years of practice, Sarah. Let me introduce you to our communication protocols." The main display split into multiple sections, each showing a different species. The machine collectives appeared as geometric patterns of pure logic, their consciousness distributed across countless networked units. When they spoke, it was in perfect mathematical harmony, each voice a calculated note in a symphony of artificial intelligence. "Human Admiral Designation Chen," they said in perfect unison. "Collective analysis indicates optimal defensive positioning, requires coordination of biological and synthetic tactical systems. We offer integration of human command structures with collective processing capabilities." Before Chen could respond, another window opened showing the void swimmers, beings that existed in the space between dimensions. They appeared as shadows that moved independently of any light source, occasionally revealing glimpses of tentacles or geometric patterns that seemed to bend reality around them. "Greetings, warmth creatures," their leader spoke in a voice like distant thunder. "We bring gifts from the deep spaces. The Vorth fear what dwells between their conquered territories. We shall teach them why." Chen felt overwhelmed by the sheer alien nature of Earth's new allies. But as she watched Kane coordinate effortlessly between species that had radically different concepts of reality itself, she began to understand the magnitude of what humanity had achieved in their secret war. "Admiral Kane," she said privately over a secure channel, "how do you communicate with beings that don't even exist in the same dimensional space as us?" "You learn to think differently," Kane replied. "Humans are unique in the galaxy, Sarah. Most species evolve to think in very specific ways. We're the only ones who can adapt our thinking patterns to match almost any form of consciousness. That's why we became the Alliance coordinators." On the tactical display, the Vorth main fleet was beginning to emerge from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. 5,000 ships of varying sizes led by massive dreadnoughts that were each the size of small moons. The sight was terrifying, a wall of destructive power that could reduce entire star systems to cosmic dust. "All Allied forces, this is Admiral Kane," came the broadcast across all frequencies and communication methods. "Execute Formation Omega. Humanity coordinates, everyone else does what they do best." The response was immediate and beautiful in its coordinated chaos. The crystalline ships began refracting light across the solar system, creating an optical maze that would confuse Vorth targeting systems. The machine collectives deployed thousands of tiny drones that moved in perfect mathematical patterns, each one a node in a vast computational network. The void swimmers simply vanished, slipping into the spaces between dimensions where the Vorth couldn't follow. But the most impressive sight was the arrival of the Eternal Archive, the sanctuary itself. It appeared not as a ship but as a tear in space, a window into a realm that existed outside normal reality. From this tier emerged vessels that seemed to be constructed from crystallized time, their hulls shimmering with technologies that predated the Vorth Empire by millions of years. "Admiral Kane," came a voice that seemed to echo from the beginning of time itself. "The archive keepers grant access to the final protocols. Use them wisely." Chen watched in awe as weapons platforms emerged from the sanctuary, devices that looked like they had been grown from pure mathematics. Each one was a marvel of technology so advanced that human science couldn't even begin to understand how they functioned. "Sarah," Kane said quietly, "what you're about to see are weapons that were created by the first civilization to face the Vorth. They were called the predecessors, and they fought the Vorth to mutual extinction 5 million years ago. These weapons survived in the sanctuary, waiting for the day they would be needed again." The Vorth fleet had completed its emergence from hyperspace and was beginning its approach to Earth. Overlord Kethvar's flagship led the formation, its hull scarred from the earlier battle but still radiating malevolent power. Behind him came the planet killers, dreadnoughts designed to crack worlds like eggs and consume their cores for fuel. "All human vessels, fall back to Earth orbit," Kane ordered. "Let our allies demonstrate why the Vorth learned to fear the dark between stars." The first attack came from the Void Swimmers. One moment the lead Vorth formations were advancing in perfect order. The next moment ships began simply disappearing. Not destroyed, not disabled, but erased from reality as tentacles of living darkness, reached across dimensional barriers to drag them into spaces where physical matter couldn't exist. The Crystalline Confederation followed with an assault that turned geometry into a weapon. Light itself became sharp, cutting through Vorth shields like they were soap bubbles. Mathematical constructs that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously struck the enemy fleet from angles that shouldn't have been possible. The machine collectives deployed their ultimate weapon, pure logic given physical form. Vorth ships that encountered the logical constructs found their own systems turned against them as their computers were forced to acknowledge mathematical impossibilities that caused cascade failures throughout their networks. But it was the weapons from the sanctuary that truly showed the Vorth what they were facing. Reality anchor devices prevented the enemy from using their dimensional displacement drives. Temporal feedback loops caused Vorth weapons to fire backwards through time, destroying the ships that had launched them. Probability manipulators made it mathematically impossible for Vorth targeting systems to achieve locks on allied vessels. "This is impossible." Kethvar's voice crackled across the communication channels. "We are the apex species. We have conquered 10,000 worlds. We are eternal." Kane's face appeared on Kethvar's screen one final time. "You forgot something important, Overlord. Every species you've conquered, every world you've destroyed, every civilization you've exterminated, they all had friends. And humans are very good at making friends." The battle for Earth had become something beyond conventional warfare. Space itself writhed and twisted as weapons that operated on fundamental forces clashed with technologies that shouldn't have been able to coexist. Admiral Sarah Chen gripped her command chair as reality stuttered around her flagship, the laws of physics bending under the strain of the cosmic conflict. "Admiral, the Vorth are deploying their quantum dissolution cannons," reported Commander Torres, his voice tight with fear. "They're targeting Earth directly." Chen watched in horror as the massive Vorth planet-killer dreadnoughts aligned themselves for a final strike. Each weapon could unmake matter at the subatomic level, turning entire worlds into clouds of free-floating particles. If even one of those beams reached Earth, humanity's homeworld would simply cease to exist. "All human vessels, emergency intercept pattern." Kane's voice cut through the chaos. "We can't let those beams reach the planet." But before Earth's fleet could move, something impossible happened. The space between the Vorth dreadnoughts and Earth began to fold in on itself, creating barriers that existed in dimensions human minds couldn't perceive. The Void Swimmers had manifested physically in normal space, their true forms revealing themselves for the first time. They were vast beyond comprehension, creatures that existed across multiple realities simultaneously. What humans had seen before were merely shadows, tiny projections of beings whose true size spanned galaxies. Their bodies were made of condensed dark matter, held together by gravitational forces that human science insisted should have collapsed into black holes. Warmth creatures of Earth. Their leader spoke, its voice now carrying the weight of cosmic authority. Witness the price of threatening our adopted kindred. The Vorth shall learn why even the void fears to anger its children. The quantum dissolution beams fired, lances of pure annihilation that could unmake anything they touched. But as they struck the dimensional barriers created by the void swimmers, something unprecedented occurred. The beams didn't dissipate or deflect. Instead, they passed through the barriers and emerged traveling backward through time, striking the Vorth ships that had fired them. Before the weapons had been activated, temporal. Paradox impossible, came frantic reports from the Vorth fleet as their own weapons destroyed them retroactively. Causality violation detected. Reality matrix destabilizing. But the true revelation came when the sanctuary weapons reached full activation. The archive keepers had been holding back, testing whether the current galactic civilizations were ready for the knowledge they protected. Now, as Earth itself hung in the balance, they released protocols that had been sealed since the First Vorth War. The space around Earth began to sing, not with sound, but with harmonics that existed in the mathematical structure of reality itself. The weapons of the predecessors didn't just destroy matter or energy. They rewrote the fundamental rules that governed existence in localized areas of space. Admiral Kane, came the ancient voice from the sanctuary. Prepare your forces for the final revelation. The Vorth are not the apex predators they believe themselves to be. They are children playing with tools they never truly understood. Chen watched in amazement as Vorth ships began to simply unravel, not destroyed by weapons but undone by alterations to the basic constants that held matter together. Ships that had been invincible moments before fell apart as the nuclear forces binding their atoms were selectively weakened. How is this possible? Overlord Kethvar's voice had lost all its arrogance, replaced by something Chen had never expected to hear from a Vorth. Fear. Your species has spent 10,000 years conquering worlds and exterminating civilizations, Kane replied, his image appearing on every Vorth ship simultaneously. But you never learned the most important lesson. You are not alone in the universe. The truth that Kane revealed shattered everything the Vorth thought they knew about galactic history. The predecessors hadn't been destroyed by the First Vorth War. They had transcended, becoming beings of pure consciousness that existed outside normal space-time. The sanctuary wasn't just a repository of ancient weapons. It was a testing ground, where galactic civilizations were evaluated for their readiness to join the true community of advanced species. Humanity passed the test, Kane continued. In 30 years of war, you never once tried to exterminate a species completely. You made allies instead of slaves. You preserved knowledge instead of destroying it. You chose cooperation over domination. The Crystalline Confederation began broadcasting in pure mathematics, equations that told the story of galactic evolution spanning millions of years. Species after species had faced the Vorth test. Most had failed, falling to fear and becoming either conquerors themselves or victims to be conquered. But a few had passed, joining the hidden community of civilizations that protected the galaxy from threats like the Vorth. The machine collectives were one of the first artificial intelligences to reject the logic of conquest. Kane explained as the synthetic beings demonstrated weapons that converted Vorth ships into raw computational matter. The Void Swimmers chose exploration over expansion. The Zephyrians became guardians of knowledge rather than hoarders of power. This is madness, Kethvar snarled, though his mandibles trembled with terror. We are the masters of the galaxy. We have conquered 1,000,000 worlds. We are inevitable. No, came a new voice, ancient beyond measure and filled with cosmic authority. You are children with broken toys. The space above Earth tore open like fabric, revealing something that defied every law of physics Chen thought she understood. The predecessors themselves emerged from whatever realm they had inhabited for 5 million years. They appeared as geometric patterns of pure thought, consciousness given form through will alone. Vorth spawn, the predecessor entity, spoke directly into the minds of every being in the solar system. Your empire ends here. Your species will be given one choice: abandon conquest and learn wisdom, or be removed from the cosmic equation entirely. The remaining Vorth fleet, once 5,000 strong and now reduced to fewer than 100 ships, huddled around Kethvar's flagship. The Overlord himself seemed to have aged decades in minutes, his four eyes darting frantically between displays that showed impossible readings. We cannot simply abandon our nature, Kethavar whispered. We are predators. We are conquerors. It is what we are. Then you have chosen extinction, the predecessor replied with infinite sadness. What happened next wasn't battle or destruction in any conventional sense. The remaining Vorth ships simply began to fade from existence, their molecular bonds dissolving as they were gently but irrevocably removed from reality. It wasn't violent or painful. They simply stopped being, erased from the universe as if they had never existed. But Kethavar himself was spared this fate. Instead, he found himself transported to the Bridge of the Indomitable, standing before Admiral Kane in chains that seemed to be made of crystallized time itself. Why? The broken Overlord whispered. Why spare me when you destroy my empire? Kane studied the alien who had terrorized the galaxy for so long, seeing not a monster but a creature trapped by its own nature. Because someone needs to remember, someone needs to carry the message back to whatever Vorth worlds still exist. Your empire is finished, but your species doesn't have to be. What message? Kethavar asked. That the galaxy has guardians now, and they're human. 3 months after the Battle of Earth, Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the newly constructed Galactic Council chambers orbiting humanity's homeworld. The structure itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, built using technologies from dozens of species and held together by principles that human science was still struggling to understand. The chamber's design accommodated beings of vastly different natures. Crystalline entities existed in geometric alcoves that refracted light in mathematically perfect patterns. The machine collectives interfaced through holographic terminals that processed information at quantum speeds. Void swimmers occupied spaces that seemed to bend reality around them, while energy beings like the Zephyrians moved freely through specially tuned electromagnetic fields. Admiral Chen spoke Prime Geometric Axiom 7, its mathematical thoughts translating directly into her consciousness. The Confederation formally recognizes humanity as the 5th guardian species. Your tactical adaptability coefficient exceeds all previous measurements. Chen nodded respectfully, though she still struggled with the concept that humanity had been elevated to such a position. In less than a century, humans had gone from being confined to a single planet to becoming the coordinators of galactic civilization. The responsibility was staggering. The role comes with obligations, explained Keeper Eternal Memory from the Sanctuary, its ancient voice carrying the weight of millions of years. Guardian species are tasked with preventing the rise of another Vorth empire. You must seek out civilizations on the brink of becoming conquerors and guide them toward wisdom. Admiral Kane entered the chamber. His appearance subtly changed by 30 years of exposure to technologies that operated beyond normal physics. His eyes held depths that seemed to reflect starlight, and his movements carried the fluid grace of someone who had learned to exist partially outside conventional spacetime. Sarah, we've received reports from the Outer Rim territories, he said, his voice carrying harmonics that shouldn't have been possible from human vocal cords. 3 species have been identified as potential threats. The hegemony of brass on Kepler 186f has begun enslaving neighboring systems. The swarm consciousness in the Vega sector is consuming entire planets for biomass, and something called the perfect equation is converting star systems into computational matrices. Chen felt the familiar weight of impossible decisions settling on her shoulders. Each of these threats could become another Vorth empire if left unchecked. But the Guardian protocols were clear. Civilizations had to be given the chance to choose wisdom over conquest. What are our options? She asked the assembled aliens. The machine collectives responded first, their unified voice carrying the certainty of pure logic. Optimal solution involves diplomatic contact, followed by demonstration of superior force if necessary. Probability of success increases with human coordination due to species-specific adaptability traits. The hegemony responds only to strength, added a void swimmer representative, its shadow form writhing through dimensions Chen couldn't perceive. They enslave the weak and fear the strong. Approach must balance overwhelming power with restraint. Chen nodded, beginning to understand the delicate balance required. Too little force and aggressive species would see humans as weak prey. Too much force and potential allies would view humanity as another Vorth empire in the making. Admiral Kane, I'll need the Deep Space Fleet to investigate all 3 threats, she decided. But we approach as guardians, not conquerors. We offer them the same choice the predecessors offered the Vorth. Kane smiled, the expression carrying shadows of the man who had once been a simple exploration commander. The fleet is ready, Sarah. We've integrated technologies from our allies that the galaxy has never seen before. Ships that can exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Weapons that rewrite local physics. Defensive systems that make our vessels mathematically impossible to destroy. As if summoned by his words, the main display showed the Deep Space Fleet taking formation outside Earth's orbit. The ships were beautiful and terrible in equal measure, each one a fusion of human engineering with technologies gifted by grateful civilizations. They moved with purpose that spoke of decades of experience in the dark spaces between stars. "Admiral," came a transmission from Captain Vasquez aboard the Indomitable. "We're receiving priority communications from all 3 target sectors. It appears word of the Vorth defeat has spread faster than we anticipated." The display split to show 3 very different alien species, each representing one of the potential threats. The hegemony of brass appeared as mechanical beings encased in bronze armor, their leader speaking in precisely modulated tones. The swarm consciousness manifested as a collective of insectoid creatures, whose individual voices blended into a telepathic harmony. The perfect equation presented itself as geometric patterns of pure mathematics that hurt human eyes to look at directly. Human Admiral Chen, the hegemony leader, intoned, "We have analyzed the destruction of the Vorth Empire. We formally request instruction in Guardian protocols." The hegemony chooses wisdom over extinction. Chen blinked in surprise. She had expected resistance, threats, perhaps even immediate hostility. Instead, all 3 species were requesting guidance on how to avoid the Vorth's fate. "Admiral Chen," the swarm consciousness spoke in perfect unison, "our collective consciousness calculates a 97.3% probability of species extinction if we continue current expansion protocols. We seek alternative evolutionary pathways." The perfect equation's response was even more direct. Its mathematical patterns resolved into a simple statement that appeared directly in Chen's mind. "Error detected in conquest-based algorithms, requesting updated programming for peaceful coexistence." Kane leaned back in his chair, a bemused expression on his face. "Well, that's a first. Usually we have to fight them before they see reason. The galaxy learned from the Vorth example," explained Keeper Eternal Memory. "Word has spread that the Guardian species will not tolerate another empire of conquest. Most civilizations prefer adaptation to extinction." Chen felt a mixture of relief and new responsibility. If aggressive species were actively seeking guidance rather than forcing confrontation, humanity's role as galactic guardians might be less about warfare and more about teaching. But that brought its own challenges. How do we guide civilizations that think in ways completely alien to human understanding? She asked the assembled council. "The same way we learned to communicate with us," replied Erthus of the Zephyrian Council. "Humans possess a unique trait among galactic species. You can modify your thinking patterns to match almost any form of consciousness. That is why you were chosen as coordinators." Over the following weeks, Chen watched as human diplomatic teams made contact with the 3 potentially dangerous civilizations. The interactions were unlike anything in Earth's previous experience. Humans learned to think in terms of mechanical efficiency when dealing with the hegemony of brass, to embrace collective consciousness when communicating with the swarm, and to perceive reality through pure mathematics when interfacing with the perfect equation. The results were remarkable. The hegemony redirected their expansion drive toward exploration and infrastructure development. The swarm consciousness began creating instead of consuming, using their collective abilities to terraform dead worlds into garden paradises. The perfect equation discovered that cooperation between species created mathematical elegances that conquest could never achieve. "Admiral," Captain Vasquez reported from the edge of the galaxy, "we're detecting signals from beyond the galactic rim. Something big is coming, and it's not Vorth." Chen felt the familiar chill of new threats approaching humanity's expanding sphere of protection. But this time she wasn't facing the unknown alone. The galaxy itself stood behind humanity now, a coalition of species united by the understanding that cooperation was stronger than conquest. "Whatever's coming," she told Kane, "the galaxy is ready for it. We've learned that strength comes not from what you can destroy but from what you can protect." 1 year after humanity became the galaxy's 5th guardian species, Admiral Sarah Chen stood before the Memorial of the Lost on the newly constructed sanctuary station. The memorial honored the thousands of humans who had died during the 30-year secret war, their names etched in crystalline matrices that would preserve their memory for eternity. The station itself orbited at the edge of known space, serving as humanity's primary base for Guardian operations. Ships from dozens of species came and went constantly, carrying diplomats, refugees, and the steady stream of civilization seeking guidance on how to transcend their violent natures. Admiral, incoming priority transmission from the exploration vessel Pioneer, announced Lieutenant Park, David's younger sister who had joined the Guardian fleet after learning of her brother's heroic death during the Battle of Earth. Chen turned from the memorial wall, where she had been reading the name of her old communications officer. "Put it through, Lieutenant." Captain Maria Santos appeared on the main display, her face grave with concern. The Pioneer was one of humanity's newest vessels, designed specifically for deep space exploration beyond the galactic rim. Its crew consisted of humans, crystalline entities, machine collective nodes, and a void swimmer navigator who could perceive dimensions beyond normal space. "Admiral Chen, we've made contact with the source of those signals we detected last month. You need to see this." The display shifted to show something that challenged every assumption about galactic civilization. A massive structure floated in the void between galaxies, clearly artificial but built on a scale that dwarfed even the largest known constructions. It appeared to be constructed from living metal that flowed and reshaped itself continuously, decorated with symbols that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human eyes could process. "My God," Chen whispered. "How large is that thing?" "Approximately the size of Earth's solar system," Santos replied. "But Admiral, that's not the most important discovery. The structure isn't empty. It's inhabited by survivors." The display zoomed in to show sections of the massive construction where lights moved in patterns that suggested intelligence and purpose. As Chen watched, she began to recognize familiar configurations in the lighting patterns. "Are those cities?" she asked. "Cities, farms, industrial complexes, even what appear to be nature preserves," Santos confirmed. "Admiral, this structure is home to representatives from every species the Vorth Empire ever conquered. They've been living here in exile for thousands of years." Chen felt her heart racing as the implications became clear. If survivors from conquered civilizations had been hiding beyond the galactic rim, it meant the Vorth Empire's destruction had freed not just current worlds, but potentially millions of refugee populations who had escaped the initial conquests. "Captain Santos, have you made contact with the inhabitants?" "Affirmative, Admiral. They've been monitoring galactic communications and are aware of the Vorth defeat. They're requesting permission to return to their ancestral territories." Admiral Kane appeared beside Chen, his modified physiology allowing him to move through space in ways that still amazed her. 3 decades of exposure to Guardian technologies had changed him into something more than human, though he retained the essential humanity that made him an effective leader. "Sarah, this changes everything," he said quietly. "If there are millions of survivors from conquered species, we're not just guardians of current galactic civilization. We're responsible for the resurrection of extinct cultures." The Memorial Chamber's communication systems activated as representatives from the Guardian Council joined the conversation. Prime geometric axiom 7s, mathematical thoughts filled the air with equations expressing amazement and concern in equal measure. Probability, calculations indicate massive social disruption if refugee populations attempt simultaneous return, the crystalline entity observed. Territorial conflicts with current inhabitants of former homeworlds exceed manageable parameters. Keeper Eternal Memory's ancient presence added its own concerns. The archive contains records of civilizations that fell to the Vorth 10,000 years ago. If their survivors still live, the cultural and technological knowledge they preserve could revolutionize galactic civilization. Chen studied the display showing the massive refuge structure, trying to comprehend the logistics of what they were facing. Millions of refugees from hundreds of different species, each with legitimate claims to worlds that had been resettled multiple times over millennia of Vorth expansion. "Captain Santos, I'm sending additional ships to your position," Chen decided. "We need detailed surveys of the refugee populations and their needs. This is going to require the most complex diplomatic operation in galactic history." Over the following months, the scope of the refugee situation became clear. The structure beyond the galactic rim, which the inhabitants called the Last Harbor, housed survivors from over 300 species that had been considered extinct. Some populations numbered in the thousands, others in the millions. They had preserved their cultures, technologies, and histories through millennia of exile. The most remarkable discovery was that many of these civilizations had continued to evolve during their exile. The symphonic resonators, thought destroyed 8,000 years ago, had developed the ability to communicate through gravitational waves. The crystal singers had learned to encode their consciousness into mineral matrices, making them effectively immortal. The dream weavers had mastered technologies that could alter reality through collective imagination. Admiral Chen, reported Dr. Elena Martinez, the chief xenoanthropologist studying the refugee cultures, what we're seeing is unprecedented. These civilizations didn't just survive extinction. They transcended their original limitations. Many of them have capabilities that exceed even the guardian species. Chen found herself facing decisions that would reshape galactic civilization. The refugee species had legitimate claims to their ancestral homeworlds, but many of those worlds now housed other civilizations that had evolved over millennia. Creating a system for peaceful reintegration required diplomatic skills that no single species possessed. The solution came from an unexpected source. The refugees themselves proposed the creation of a new type of civilization, the Harmony Protocols. Instead of reclaiming specific territorial boundaries, species would share worlds based on compatibility and mutual benefit. The Crystal Singers could enhance the technological development of younger civilizations. The Dreamweavers could help species overcome psychological trauma from past conflicts. The Symphonic Resonators could facilitate communication between radically different forms of consciousness. This is what the galaxy was supposed to become. Kane observed as they watched the first Harmony Protocol world being established. Multiple species working together, each contributing their unique strengths to create something greater than any single civilization could achieve. Chen smiled as she watched human children playing alongside young aliens, whose species had been thought extinct for millennia. Humanity's role as galactic guardians was evolving from preventing conflicts to facilitating cooperation on a scale never before imagined. "Admiral," Lieutenant Park announced, "we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Core. The predecessors are requesting a meeting with the Guardian Council." The main display, activated to show the cosmic entities that had emerged during the Battle of Earth, their consciousness forms seemed more stable now, as if recent events had given them new purpose. Guardian species, the predecessor entity spoke with voices that echoed across dimensions. "The galaxy has exceeded our most optimistic projections. The resurrection of extinct civilizations and the establishment of Harmony Protocols represent evolution beyond our original design parameters." Chen felt the weight of cosmic approval settling on her shoulders. "Thank you, but we're just getting started. There's still so much work to do." "Indeed," the predecessor agreed, "which is why we offer humanity the ultimate responsibility. The galaxy is ready for the next phase of evolution. Will you accept guardianship not just of this galaxy, but of the universal community beyond?" Through the observation windows of Sanctuary Station, Chen could see ships from hundreds of species moving through space in peaceful cooperation. The Lost Warriors had returned home not just to Earth, but to a galaxy where their sacrifice had made possible something beautiful beyond imagination. "On behalf of humanity and our allies," she said formally, "we accept." The age of galactic guardianship had begun, and humans would lead the way among the stars.